That would be my husband, and what you all don't know but he does is that although I've been an athlete and whatever my whole life, I'm prone to tripping. And so as I'm walking, I'm thinking, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip. And I made it, so yes, success. Thank you. Although I stand before you a little terrified of the crowd, I am also really thrilled to be here and to invite you in to my fascination with a really simple idea. A simple idea that for me has revolutionized the way I work with children, revolutionized my stance in the world. A simple idea that this could not be the more perfect place to talk about. The simple idea is listening. Listening, which even as I say it, right, is very mundane and average and every day, we do it all the time. I think today is such a perfect time to talk about it because I don't know about you, but I am feeling that really deep soul satisfaction of a whole day filled with incredible opportunities to listen, which is good because we all need them. And listening is almost an innate, a very natural thing that we need to do. And the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "A baby's first cry is a bid for attention. Someone, please listen." And if you're a parent, you may know that cry never stops. At least it didn't for my three, who are now 18 and 8 and 6. But if I'm really honest, I would say that cry never stopped for me either. And I'm guessing that it never stopped for most of us in this room. We all need someone to listen, right? When I think about listening, I'm going to differentiate for a moment between listening, which I'm going to say is really hard, and the rest of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, sort of all the time. We hear, right, and we spend time to focus, and we nod at the appropriate places, and we focus enough to be able to repeat back a few words if we need to. And we work really hard not to interrupt, which I'm working on all the time. Let's not interrupt. But I'm going to suggest to you that listening is even harder. That listening requires that I quiet my own experience to make room for someone else's. So simple, so powerful. So think for just a moment, for you, when was the last time that you can recall really being listened to? Where someone held space for your experience. I've come to think of these moments a little like drops of water. One by one, sort of individual, they're kind of insignificant, right? These drops, they just fall, but like drops of water that eventually pool, these moments of listening, eventually, they create the totality of our experiences of being heard, of being regarded, of being understood. Listening really matters. But I imagine as you went looking for your experience of really feeling listened to, you bypassed a lot of other experiences, right, that we all have also where we weren't necessarily heard, weren't necessarily listened to, right? There's something, even though we have these opportunities all the time, all day long, there is something that is in the way of our best attempts to listen. What is it that interrupts our listening? I recently came across this phrase that for me put the entire thing into perspective, and it was, certainty is the enemy of listening. And I thought, right, of course, it makes complete sense because we're incredibly busy people. So if I already know, I don't have time to be present and listen. So I began to think further and dig a little into my own experience. So what is it that I think I know? What is it that I'm so certain about that it's interrupting my listening? And there were 3 things that seemed to come up with enough regularity to deserve a little attention. The first certainty that I encountered, I'm going to call assumption. It goes something like this. I already know who you are. I sized you up in the first 5 minutes when I saw you or heard you speak. I know your type. You're one of those people. I have a label. I'm not afraid to use it. So my experience has already defined yours. So I'm no longer listening. The second certainty that I've encountered kind of builds on the judgment of the first. The second certainty that interrupts, I'm going to call arrogance. Not only do I know who you are, I have already decided that who you are has no relevance, nothing to do with me. Your race, your politics, your point of view, your story, they have nothing to do with my life, and in fact, it may find them a bit offensive, and so, if I can, I will avoid talking with you altogether, but if I must, then I will hope that you are brief, because my experience has already declared yours irrelevant. So I am no longer listening. The third certainty that I encountered in my experience is even more deeply personal. The third certainty that interrupts our listening, I'm going to call fear. I am afraid that listening to you may require something of me. My time, my energy, my resources. Listening to your experience may cause me discomfort. I may feel guilty. I may feel judged. Your experience may challenge mine. And if I listen to you, who's going to listen to me? There is too much risk in listening. Now, I can speak on these things because I encounter them. I encounter them in my daily walk as I decide whose eyes I'm going to meet, whose smile I'm going to return. Who do I really mean it when I say, "How are you?" And I imagine that of the nearly 3,000 of you in this room, a few of you may find a couple of those feel familiar as well. And I can stop there and just sort of recognize that in the way that we recognize, oh, okay, or I can continue and consider that each one of those moments, each one I'm making a decision, I am either listening or I am communicating something else. I am communicating, you are not worthy of my time, of my interest, of my engagement. You are not worthy. And in fact, you do not matter. Now, in the diversity work that I do, in the skin that I'm in, these words, you do not matter, them as fighting words. And as Mr. Moore reminded us all this morning, you can look across history in any direction and find atrocity after atrocity committed based on this very basic idea: you do not matter. And we contribute drop by dehumanizing drop. But you can also look across history in any direction and find one population who at any moment stands at the ready with the potential to imagine something different. This population is our children. But consider for a moment how we listen to children. We listen with assumption. We assume their capabilities. We adjust our vocabularies accordingly. We listen to their wild imaginations and curiosities with amusement, rather than the awe of the amazingness of coming up with anything inventive in this world. We tend to listen with arrogance, thinking that we have more to teach than we have to learn, rarely allowing children to be the experts on anything, even their own experience. And we listen with a little fear. We listen for evidence. Am I a good parent? Am I a good teacher? Are you doing the right things? Are you going to be okay? Rather than listening for who children are. Now, I've been an educator for about 19 years now, and most of that time I worked with young children, and I always thought I was a pretty good listener, until I relearned listening through the experiences of my daughter, who, when she was 3.5, was a literal bud, completely closed in on herself, fearful, anxious, worried. She was open in the familiarity of home, but she was closed to everything the world had to offer. And in this fragile place, my husband and I, hearts on our sleeves, like many of you have had to in this room, we sent her to school. Love her, care for her, see her. And my daughter bloomed. My daughter bloomed because she encountered teachers that listened with their entire being, that believed that a child's fondest wish is to be known. She bloomed. And I can tell you that as she listened to me tell this story, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "Mama, it's true." I said, "I know. I know because I watched it." And I would give a kidney to this day to those teachers, but my teacher brain also wanted to know more. So eventually I became a teacher at my daughter's school, and I started to play with this idea of listening, this different way of listening in the classroom. And the first thing I had to do was to ask a question every day that I didn't already know the answer to. And if you've ever been a teacher, you know that most of our day is spent listening for the answers to things we already know the answer to. That's our job, to make sure you know the answers too. But when I started thinking of questions I didn't know the answer to and asking them, I had way more curiosity of the answers. And I stopped listening for the answers I was hoping for and just listened to the thinking of children. And as I listened to the thinking of children with more and more humility, I was throwing out the hardest questions that I had. And eventually, I threw out, so, okay, what does it take for an individual to thrive within a community? I really want to know. And one of my second graders, he told me, well, you have to give of yourself and really stand up for yourself and be strong. Okay, put that in my pocket, work on that the rest of my life. And then I asked them about learning, right? I really want to know, what is going on in your brain? What's in charge up there? And one of my first graders told me, well, I think it's imagination. Because if you can't imagine it, it's very hard to believe in it. Right? So, can we, in this room, imagine a world in which everybody matters? Can we, in this room, imagine a world in which every child knows they matter. What could? A child who knew, drop by drop, you matter, your ideas matter, you are important, you are cared for, do. To break cycles of addiction, to break cycles of poverty, to break cycles of abuse that plague our communities. Can you imagine? When you feel known and cared for, you make different decisions. What could any of us do? Especially those most vulnerable, those most disenfranchised, those least likely to see reflected in our daily lives, you matter. What could we do? If the people around us purposed to make room, to listen, to make room for our experience, what could we do? Could we find the power to show up, to be innovative, to be creative, to reach for our dreams, to fulfill our potential? Can you imagine? And if you can imagine, can you believe with me that it's worth a little work? A little work to listen differently. A little work to replace assumption with curiosity. I genuinely wonder who you are. To replace arrogance with humility. Who you are matters. To replace our fear with courage. Listening to you requires vulnerability in me, and I choose it. Can we in this room believe that it's worth a little work? I say we, and I invite you in because, as my family can tell you, I am not the perfect listener. I am still busy and too tired and grumpy a lot of the time and not in the mood to listen. And besides that, there are a whole lot of people in the world to listen to. So, for you, when was the last time that you really listened to a spouse, to a neighbor, to a coworker, the ones you like, the ones you don't like, to your child? When was the last time you really listened? And as we think about our experience today, for me, this whole day has been one of those soul-satisfying, brain-tingling, worth-affirming experiences of gratitude for the diversity of the human experience. So here's my challenge. Can we take this experience in the power of listening, and can we take it out of this room, and can we consider where assumption and arrogance and fear are in the way and do a little work? And I ask you for a very personal reason. I mentioned I have 3 children. My oldest is in college now. And he's not coming home anymore for mama to listen. He is looking to you, and to you, and to you, drop by drop. So my challenge and my question as we leave this place, will you consider listening differently? Thank you very much for your time.